Good morning, Shadow of the Golden Dome. Happy Thursday morning, and we're back with another interview. Today, I am more than honored to be joined by Jerry McKenna, Notre Dame class of 1962, acclaimed sculptor, United States Air Force veteran serving 27 years, and the artistic force behind over 20 works of art on Notre Dame campus, including statues most of you have taken photos next to. Newt Rockne, Frank Leahy, Dan Devine, Lou Holtz, and the Four Horsemen, which sits in the Goog. With over 200 sculptures worldwide, from the Pro Football Hall of Fame to Ireland and Norway, Jerry's art captures history, faith, and heroism. He joins us now from Bourne, Texas. Jerry, thank you for your time, sir. How are you?
I'm fine. You pretty well capsulized everything. I don't need to have an interview now. You
Have a great
covered
day,
it.
everybody.
Yeah.
So I always like to start these the same way. Take us back to when you decided to attend Notre Dame. What was the process like, and what about campus and South Bend drew you to enroll?
Well, my first inkling of Notre Dame was when I was a boy in Connellsville, Pennsylvania. That name might seem familiar with the old Notre Dame fans because that was the birthplace and home of Johnny Lujack. So that's one thing Lujack and I uh, had in common, other than the fact my mother was his babysitter when he was a boy. But the first school I ever heard of, college that is, was Notre Dame. My cousin went there out of Connellsville. He was a high school teammate of Blue Jacks. And so all the way, I was 10 years, 12 years behind Lou Jack. And I always thought of Notre Dame. There was no other school that I would ever consider going to. But my father was a construction engineer, and we moved all around the country. And by the time I got out of high school, St. Edward High School in Cleveland, Ohio, I had been to 20 high schools. And my GPA was kind of shaky, and I didn't do very well on the SATs. But somehow, through some miracle, I got into Notre Dame, and I got in there to study for the priesthood. And for the first 2 years at Notre Dame, I was at Old College down by the lake. And then the second year, I was at Sacred Heart Novitiate in Jordan, Minnesota. And then the community and myself mutually agreed that perhaps I wasn't cut out for the cloth. And I went back to a steel mill in Gary, Indiana, and at which time I met my wife, and I saved money to get back to Notre Dame. And I did so. And when I got back there, I was lucky enough to get a job at St. Mary's. So I worked out of St. Mary's. I lived there and attended Notre Dame. Uh, I had a job. I lived in a garage in the back of campus along with 8 other Notre Dame students, and for 18 hours of work a week, we were given our board, room, and laundry. So that, in short, is how I got to Notre Dame.
How was the enrollment process as a student? You said your GPA was a little shaky, and I know, it's notoriously a hard school to get into, right? You need a lot of extracurriculars and things like that. Back when you enrolled, was that still the case? Did you have to share with them things you did outside of the classroom, or was it just the grace of God that they took you because you were saying the GPA was a little
To
shaky?
tell you this, I wouldn't have gotten in today. There is no way. I've got two grandsons that are there. Uh, the one that is still there, he's going to be a junior. He never got anything but an A plus in any course from kindergarten to his senior year in high school. I think he missed one question on the SAT. That's the kind of people they're taking today. I wasn't like that at all. I mean, I had maybe a high C average, but our school was only 3 years old. It was a Holy Cross school there in Lakewood. And Notre Dame had made a deal with Notre Dame or with St. Edward that they would allow 20 graduates each year into Notre Dame, and that was an inducement to have kids from the west side of Cleveland go to Notre Dame. I mean, go to St. Ed's, because that was almost a guarantee that if they were fairly bright and wanted to go there, that they could enter Notre Dame. So that's sort of the wind that swept me onto the campus back in 1956. Uh, I was very, very fortunate. It was more or less divine providence that I ended up there.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, that's a really, really cool story. So you go to Notre Dame, and I'm trying to think back from the book, which I want to talk about later, but you were studying, you graduated with a degree in the arts, is that correct?
Yes, I got a Bachelor of Fine Arts. I switched a couple times from commercial art to fine art, but all within the art department. And to be honest with you, I'd always had uh, a bit of talent for art. By the time I was in the seventh grade, I could take a pencil and get a likeness drawing anybody in the class. And so I was sort of the class artist that everybody knows about. Every class seems to have one. Uh, so that when I got to Notre Dame, I knew I needed to get something I was comfortable with, because I wasn't doing well in academics as a seminarian, and I felt that I would never get through that school if I didn't get something that I could do and do well. And the only thing that fell into that category was fine art and painting. So I got my degree in painting, and it was a long process. It took me 6 years to get through. So even though I started in 56, it was 62 by the time I graduated.
Okay, so you graduate from the University of Notre Dame, and then was the goal at that point to make a living in those days as an artist, and the transition to starting to serve in the armed forces, how did that come about? Did you try the artist thing and then decide to join the Air Force, or what did that part of your journey look like?
Well, after I graduated, I went from job to job. I worked for a commercial art studio in South Bend. I worked for Armco Steel as a draftsman and designer. I went over to Richardson Homes Corporation in Elkhart, Indiana, and designed mobile homes. Then I found myself in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, high up on a scaffolding, painting billboards in the middle of winter. And that wasn't a very appealing thing. So I climbed down off one afternoon and went into a recruiting office down below. I could see the sign, U.S. Air Force. And I went in and we chatted. They gave me a hot cup of coffee. And I stayed for a while, and they told me that I could become a pilot and tear up the world as an Air Force officer. It sounded appealing, particularly since it was sub-zero outside, and the training ground first would be at Lackland Air Force Base, San Antonio, Texas. So March of 1963, I put up my hand and was sworn in, and got in my car and drove on down to Texas. And that was the start of a 27-year career.
Wow. And you retired as a lieutenant colonel.
I did.
Fantastic. What you got a couple great travel stories from the from your years with the Air Force, or a couple great stories you always like to recall? I mean, you've probably been all over the
Yeah.
world at this point.
Well, it was interesting. I saw one of your last interviews, and it was with Cappy Gagnon. And Cappy made a statement in there that with any individual, you can find a job in which you'll be awful. And then you can find a job for the same person in which you'll be terrific. Well, not to brag, because I was just lucky that all the jobs that they put me in the Air Force were jobs that I could be terrific. Now, I wasn't always terrific, but I really had the opportunity. At one point, I was the youngest base commander in the Air Force. I was in my 30s, commanding High Wycombe Air Station in London, England, a base that's not there anymore. But it was a fun job. It lasted 4 years. I was a forward air controller, executive officer of a squadron in Vietnam for a year, and that was very exciting. And I had 40 operating locations at places nobody ever heard of, and that lasted a year. And I was on the air staff as a message analyst in the Pentagon for a little over a year. And then for 4.5 years, I was an exec officer for a major command, the Electronic Security Command, where I worked for General Doyle Larson. Now, since I mentioned General Larson, I got to point out all of us have mentors in our lives. And I had three that really particularly stand out. For most of my life, I was a very close friend of Father Ted Hesburgh, and I never missed an occasion to go in and be with him when I was on the campus. So he was number one. Number two was Professor Robert Leader, art professor, very popular on the campus back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. He taught art history and he taught design. He was also one of the flag bearers at Mount Suribachi on Iwo Jima, and he was wounded. By the time they brought the full-size flag up to the top of the mountain, he couldn't participate in the famous Joe Rosenthal photograph of them raising the second flag. But if you go out to Cedarhurst Cemetery there at Notre Dame, his tombstone is there. Pardon me. And the Marine Corps has put a bronze plaque on the back of his Marine Corps testifying to the fact that he was an original flag bearer. So those two mentors really meant a lot to me at Notre Dame. I have several more, but I won't go into that.
Oh, that's fantastic. As far as your artistry, did you always start with the statues and the sculpting, or was there painting? Was there something that led to what you ultimately ended up doing?
Well, I managed to avoid, for the most part, doing any art while I was in the military. There was just too much going on. I did a couple paintings when I was in Vietnam. My commander in Vietnam was a World War II ace, and I did a painting of him shooting down a Japanese Zero. Strangely, 50 years later, I got in contact by his daughter, and he bequeathed that painting back to me, and I gave it to my son, who is presently the chief of public affairs for the Pacific Air Forces. He's a full colonel, going to retire next month after 33 years. But he's got that hanging in his office. And I mention it because it covered an event, the shoot down of a Japanese Zero that happened in the South Pacific. It was painted in Southeast Asia, where I was stationed. And now it resides right in the middle of the Pacific at Hickam Air Force Base at my son's office. So that was one of the few paintings I did on active duty. But I love sculpture, I always did. I never studied it, but everywhere I went in my Air Force career, any park that had sculpture, I would stay in there and study every piece I could. And I've always been a fan of anatomy. And so I had a lot of books on anatomy, and I studied those over the years. So by the time I retired, I had decided I was going to try. And there was an event happened just before I retired that convinced me even more that this was meant for me. A chief of staff of our command had died, and one of the sergeants had the idea of making a hall, an assembly hall, named in his honor. And the general came to me and said, "Look, Jerry, I'd like you to spruce that up and really make it look good." So the first thing I thought of is having a big bas-relief sculpture of him in the lobby, but I'd never done one. So I called our graphics section and told them to do it. And they said, "Well, Colonel, we've never done it down here either." And I said, "Well, it's easy enough. Just get a piece of plywood and cut it in a circle and clay on it and see what you can do." So a couple of months later, they called me and they says, "Could you come down here? This doesn't look like the man." So I came down, I looked at it, and sure enough, it didn't look like him. So I got my fingers wet and got into the clay, and within 15 minutes, I had a likeness. And they were saying, "Colonel, where'd you learn to do that?" I said, "Well, right here. This is the first piece of sculpture I've ever done." So I went back home that night and told my wife, we were getting pretty close to retirement. I says, "I know what I'm going to do now. I'm going to be a sculptor when I retire." And she laughed that off. But she knew I was serious, and she wondered if I could really do it. And so the next day, I went down to a local art store and bought some clay, and I did a head of a general that I was working for, and I did a couple more pieces. And before I knew it, people were buying my work. But uh, then I was stationed in England uh, as the commander of a communications group over there, and all the chances to sculpt were done in for the next 4 years. But when those 4 years rolled around and I retired, the next day I started buying clay and drawing up plans for a studio, and the rest is history.
Do you think how much of that is natural and how much of that talent do you think you're born with and how much of it is learned as you go? Can you quantify that really? I mean, you were into anatomy and that kind of, so you probably had a good feel for recreating somebody, especially like in bronze like you do. But how much of that is learned and how much of that is natural, you think?
Well, I always call it the gift, and I
Yeah.
believe that probably north of 75% of it is a gift, and only about 20% is learned. And you have to learn that. That's what really makes you good. If you can master that, the part you have to learn. And I've never considered myself a great artist. I consider myself a journeyman who got very lucky and got lots of commissions, 273 to be exact, over my 35-year career. And I, I had a gift to get a likeness uh, on most pieces I did, and I got lucky early in the game. I was only 4 years out of the Air Force when Tom Landry and Dan Coughlin of Notre Dame both brought up my name to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and they hired me. And for 10 years, I did their sculptures every year. And about that same time, I won a national competition to create the Lincoln Douglas debate sculpture, life size, at the very spot where the 1858 debate occurred. So that sort of put me on the map as an important sculptor, I guess I'd say. And a lot of work fell to me as a result of that. Uh, and then the Leahy lads were very important in my career. They hired me to do the Leahy that you just showed me before this broadcast, the miniature of it. And out of that grew the Parisian and the Holtz and the Divine and the Krause and the Rockney and many, many other sculptures. I did one of Father Ted in Jerusalem. Uh, I did one of Rockney in Norway. Uh, did one of Saint Beset in Ireland as well, and across the street at Holy Cross College, there's a sculpture of Saint Beset holding his arms out to welcome people coming into the school. So one thing led to another. Is I heard Father Jenkins say in an interview not long ago as to how he got to be president of Notre Dame. Well, one thing led to another as to how Jerry McKenna got so many sculptures.
Yeah, it was I'm trying to recall from the book I was kind of flipping through as you were talking there. Your first commission through Notre Dame? Is that accurate? Your first actual commissioned work? Was that Father Hesburgh?
It wasn't, but that
Okay.
was most important to me. First commission. The first one was I I had done a bas relief, and it was laying against the wall down at the old Alamo Foundry, and where the Alamo Dome is presently located. And I was still in uniform, and a person called me and said, are you Jerry McKenna, the sculptor?" And it's the first time I'd ever heard anybody say Jerry McKenna, the sculptor. I said, yes, I am. And then they commissioned me to do a football player who had died during practice, a high school football player, bas relief. They wanted it for a gym. And that was about 1981. It was a one off, but that was the first one I ever received money for. And then years later, Father Ted called me and he wanted one of Father SOGD, which now stands in the Great Hall of O'Shaughnessy Hall. That's been there since 1993. So that really was my first real commission. It was of a bust of Father SOGD. And by the way, that meant a lot to me because after 6 years at Notre Dame, uh, I had a pretty low GPA. I was working at St. Mary's during the week, and then on weekends, I was working at the steel mill in Gary, Indiana to get my tuition and my spending money. So I was working 36 hours a week and going to school. So as a result, my grades weren't very good. And the last semester, I flunked a core course. Believe it or not, it was in religion. So I went in to see Father SOGD, and I had a lot of credits because I'd been there 6 years, but you had to have those core course credits to graduate. So I went in and talked to him, and he said, "You still here?" I said, "Yeah, Father, this is my sixth year." Sixth year? And so by that time, I figured he was ready to get rid of me. And I explained my dilemma. He said, "Oh, let me see what I can do." So I went through the graduation and all. And in those days, you didn't get your diploma at the ceremony. You at that time you went over to the, in our case, the art gallery and picked it up. They sorted through the M's, and when they did, my diploma was there. I was never happy to see a piece of paper in my life as when he slid that diploma out and handed it to me. So I had a great motive to do a good job on Father SOGD, and I hope I did.
How does it feel to be called a sculptor for the first time? Do you still remember when you heard that? Did it floor you? Was it like, wow, is this real life? Like, how did that feel when you were asked, are you Jerry McKenna, the sculptor?
Well, I can't really remember back that far. I'm 87 now, and I've been called a sculptor most of my life, it
Yeah.
seems. Uh, I do think it's a nice thing to be known as, but I like being named as known as Colonel McKenna too. But that's so long ago that now we're talking the Middle Ages. But uh, something I may not have told you before, but last week, 70 people came to my house and we had a big retirement party. So I am now Jerry McKenna, the former sculptor. I even wrote a letter to Notre Dame letting them know that I was hanging it up. I just can't do it anymore. I got a bad heart, a bad back. I'm going blind in my left eye with the same problem that Father Hesberg had, macular degeneration, and my arthritis in my hands is pretty poor. So it was time to hang it up, and my sculptures were getting bigger and bigger. I mean, one of my most recent was the French Connection over at the stadium in Buffalo of 3 8-foot hockey players, and my doctor tells me I can't lift over 10 pounds. Well, that sculpture probably weighs 3 tons, so
Wow.
I'm a little bit out of that league now, and it's a time for me to hang it up.
So was that your last piece of work?
No, my last piece of work was Benjamin Franklin leaning on a broom of all things
Really?
in Arcola, Illinois, and that was requested by a classmate, a 1952 classmate, Pat Monahan, for his hometown. Yeah,
Wow.
that was my well, actually, my last piece was Lou Holtz. It's a bust that was placed into his old high school in East Liverpool, Ohio, in commemoration of him receiving the Medal of Freedom from President Trump. And that was meaningful to me as well. I've known Lou for 30 years more or more. And my father also graduated from East Liverpool High School.
Wow.
That was my last sculpture.
So what's true retired life look like? What does it look like these days?
Well, it's kind of scary because I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm an avid reader, and I have been for years. I've read a book a week
Hmm.
for probably the last 10 years, and I'll keep reading. And I'm not so physically fit as to get around, but I do like to travel. Uh, Next week we're going to Hawaii. My son Sean, as I mentioned earlier, is retiring from the Air Force after 33 years, and they're having a retirement ceremony for him in Hawaii, and we're going over there. That'll be the third time actually we've visited him in Hawaii because it's a great gig, and he's got a great place to stay, and we love the climate over there.
You make it back to a campus from time to time?
We do, but I've stopped going to games. It's
Okay.
just too much of a hassle. We have a little condo there in South Bend, and we have a grandson at the university now. So we'll always get up there maybe two, three times a year. Uh, but I've come up there on game weekends and just watched it from the hotel.
Hmm.
Uh, it's easier for me. The easiest thing is to watch it from my studio. I got a giant screen in here and a big, comfortable chair, and uh, that's where I sit, dreaming each year of another national championship, which the Irish never cease to let me down.
Yeah, I know those feelings. Well, we came close last year. I mean, we came awfully close, but okay. So I believe you published this in 2009, 2010. I just
I
want to
did.
I want to talk about it briefly. A Third Life: Sculptures for God, Country, and Notre Dame. This was really, really cool. I mean, not only how, so I got to ask, anytime I talk to somebody that's written a book, did you write the entirety of this? Did you have someone help you put it together? What did the publishing of this look like? It's a gorgeous book,
Well, I did. I wrote every word myself except the foreword by Father Hesburgh,
which is
and
fantastic.
which I was very appreciative that he did that. Um, and it kind of just fell out because it was chronological of my life, and also it was sculpture by sculpture. So there was a story behind each one of those that I found very interesting, and I hope the readership did as well. And then I kind of ended up with some points for young artists, how to get ahead, and sort of behind the scenes ideas that I had on the morality of sculpting and morality of business. I feel very strongly that anytime I get into a relationship on a sculpture, a business relationship, that everybody comes out feeling good about it. Uh, and I've been very fortunate in that regard. So that's pretty much the book. I wanted my kids to have it, to be honest with you. I wanted my family to know a little bit about it. And then after that, I during COVID, I wrote a 625-page memoir incorporating everything about my life, which I did 35 copies for my immediate family and some close friends.
Oh,
So
that's not going to see the light of day as far as a publishing situation.
no, no, it'll probably end up on eBay as people get tired. In fact, it's so funny. A couple of my books ended up on eBay just last week. My son was laughing about it. One was they were both from deceased people that were from their estates. One was a teammate, football teammate of mine, uh, and classmate, and the other one was a colonel that I'd served with in the Air Force. And they both, and it's got a very personal uh, salutation in the front of each book, which I preferred not to be on eBay.
Right.
But that's what happens when you give a book to somebody and they die and the family doesn't want to do, they stick it on eBay because it is an attractive book. It's very well made. I had a gentleman by the name of Brent Haynes out of West Virginia who was my publisher, and he had the very best dust cover made, and in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, at a very old, established uh, uh, bindery that it's very well bound, and all the pages are meant to last for hundreds of years. That's one of the finest books I've ever seen as far as lasting.
I was going to make a comment about that. It's probably one of the most well put together books I've ever seen. Every picture, every page is full color. Great quality. Yeah, the binding's fantastic. Yeah, this thing's gonna last forever. Yeah, it is a
Yeah.
really, really great book. A Third Life: Sculptures for God, Country, and Notre Dame. I just want everybody that watches to see it. It is a fantastic book. Um,
Yeah, the only place to buy it is on eBay and Prime because it never did get commercially printed. I sold about 2,000 of them, so there's a lot of them show up here and there.
so for those of us that know nothing about the behind the scenes of how these awesome sculptures get all over the world, and I know you've probably been asked this a million times, but for my audience, can you give us just a quick process of what it looks like, what kind of man hours go into each of these pieces of work that you do, and kind of how it gets from clay to bronze? Can you kind of walk us through that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. First off, you have to have a clear vision of what the customer is looking for, the pose, and in order to nail that down, you do a small version, about 12 to 18 inches tall, called a maquette. And you work out a lot of the technical difficulties small, and then if they don't like it, it can be changed rather easily, small and in clay, uh, so that by the time you cast the maquette, you've got exactly what it's going to look like. In fact, Gene, you might hold up that sculpture you showed me earlier. This is a maquette of the Frank Leahy sculpture that I did, and that was done as an issue to help sell it years ago. But that's what a maquette looks like and is made out of bronze. So once you get that, then you got to start doing your research. And I do a lot of research about the person themselves and also about the football gear, that if it's a football sculpture that they're wearing. I'll get on the internet and find every possible pose, where the way the wrinkles will lay on that sculpture, on the, like the coach or the players, and then I build a, let's say it's going to be 8 feet tall. I'll get in with welding rods and rebar and construct a skeleton upon which I will later place foam, and that's all put on with heat and pushed together, the foam where it's melting. And I'll get a rough outline of it in foam, and then I'll cover that with clay. And so when I finish the clay, let's say it's 8 feet tall, it'll look almost identical to that small maquette that you just showed us, except it's huge. And then I get that thing up on a trailer and I haul it 20 miles away to the foundry and we push it off. And from there on, we got to make molds. And the first molds are rubber, and they go over the whole thing. And seams are cut in that rubber so it can be pulled apart. Uh, and then over the rubber is a plaster mold called the mother mold, and that holds the rubber mold in place. And when the plaster heals and it's hard, then you can pull apart the mold, and in the inside of that rubber mold then is slathered molten wax, and it's you do the whole thing about an eighth to a quarter inch thick in wax, and when you assemble it, it looks like an 8 foot chocolate candy you used to get in an Easter basket. It's all hollow. It's just that wax. Well, you cut it down into smaller pieces, and you put it into a room where you build another mold over the wax pieces made out of a slurry, a sort of ceramic. And when it dries and you have some vent holes in it, you put it in an oven and you melt that out. And while the mold is still hot, you move it over and you pour molten bronze into that vacant mold. And so each piece, and like the Leahy we were just looking at, there's probably 20 pieces that are made that way, and they all have to be welded back together in such a way that you can't even see the welds. That's called chasing. And when you get all that done, you put a patina on it, which is you heat up the sculpture, uh, and you spray on a ferrous oxide, which is a iron compound. It's the shade of what we consider bronze to look like, but it's actually from an iron source. And and then when it dries, you cover it with Carnauba wax, Johnson's floor wax, and that's your final product. It's very time intensive. You're talking about the French Connection, the one I did there in Buffalo. It probably took 3 months in the foundry and about 8 people. So it's very time intensive, and these sculptures end up costing a lot of money. Uh,
Yeah. So you're talking 3 months in the foundry, and then as far as what happens in your studio, how many hours do you have in the studio
oh,
getting to that point?
yeah, I never count the hours, but something like the French Connect. Well, let's just take the Frank Leahy, the one you have there. That was life size and a half. If he stood up, he'd be 9 foot tall. And that probably took me 2 months working long hours, because I
Mm.
remember I finished it at 5:30 in the morning. I had worked from 10 o'clock the previous morning all the way to 5:30. Back in the day, when I had lots of energy, I would just be a workaholic. I'd never pull away. I just didn't know how to do that. And so, yeah, I'd say about 2 or 3 months to do that. And
And I
so,
and I just want to briefly, because so it'll come up on the podcast, but this is I was talking with Jerry before we went live. This was from George Dixon's personal collection. This is one of Jerry's works right here, and this is your maquette right here, right? This is an
that's
example
right.
of yeah, and this thing, I probably have to say this thing's at least 10 pounds or close to it. It's not light. But yeah, it's gorgeous. So and is it safe to say that you were one of the best known sculptors out there? Is that a true statement? I mean, you've got work all
Well,
over the world.
a lot of people know me. I have a good spread of work so they can see it. Uh, I'm reminded of a story, and I would love to tell this story. Humphrey Bogart was in Sherwood Forest, or not Petrified Forest, which was Robert Sherwood's big play back in the late 30s. And he did a good job, and they hired him in Hollywood to go do it with Betty Davis. So it was a big hit as well. So Bogey gets back to Broadway after the film is done, and he's bragging to his cohorts about how great he is. And one of them took him aside and said, Bogey, there's 25 unemployed actors on Broadway right now who could do just as good a job in that role as you did. Well, that's sort of the way I feel about my work. There's 25 unemployed sculptors who could have stepped in and did any one of the pieces I did and do just as good a job. There's a lot of talent out there. But I got, like Bogey, I've gotten lucky many, many times. And, uh, and that's how I've gotten my work. And I try not to let anybody down once they entrust me with a commission. And I do my absolute best. And when I walk away, there's nothing I can do to make it better. That doesn't mean it couldn't be made better, but I've done everything I could for each piece. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, it no, it certainly does. I was going to say one of the whole in this book, one of the things that stood out to me the most, while the whole thing is beautiful, was actually some of the things that you put in the end of the book for aspiring artists, talking about if you're going to do something, do it the best way you can, do it the best you can. Like work hard on it, be honest, have integrity. And listening to you talk, I was thinking about that because I actually highlighted that part of the book. I thought that was really cool, and it's a testament to the commissions you've gotten, over 270, and the work you've done. People keep coming back because you do a great job and you're dedicated to it. So I think that's really, really, really cool to listen to, and a lesson a lot of people these days could certainly heed as well.
Well,
Um,
if I could break in and say something, I think a lot of that ethics goes back to my teaching at Notre Dame. I want to give my alma mater some credit there because ethics was a part of every single class I took. There was a right way and the wrong way, and it came through. And if I didn't get it after 6 years at Notre Dame, I wasn't going to get it at all. And so I've tried to be honest and forthright in my career, and both careers, the Air Force and sculpture, and that's why I put that in there so people would know that to me is the way to do business.
how so the question I wanted to ask earlier, I'm just so curious. If someone wants to hire Jerry McKenna for a sculpture, and I know you've done a lot of I believe I read in the book you've done plenty that you gave, but
Oh
if
yeah.
for sure, but give me an idea of what is the final total you're charging somebody if it's a full-on commission, it's not something you're doing pro bono. What kind, I mean, what's somebody paying for one of those?
Well, if you'd asked me that last month, I would have probably not answered it. But now that I'm retired, I can tell you that uh, anywhere from $10,000 to $300,000, depending on the size. Those are the actual prices I charged while I
Wow.
was a sculptor. Yeah.
Wow. Is that based on the size or the
Yeah.
intricacy of the work, or how would you quote that out?
It's mostly size because bronze is expensive and the time in the foundry is expensive.
Hmm.
Those welders and chafers and or chasers, uh, uh, they don't work for free. I mean, they have to make a living wage, and so I'm supporting with every sculpture about 8 people, eight
Wow.
or nine people. I'm helping them make a living because my work goes on, and then they work on it. And at one time, I was the probably the most productive sculptor in the stable there at the foundry. Uh, it seemed like every time I went out there, they were just working on my work alone. So there was a period of time where I was very productive.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. Well, what would you say in your body of work? It's probably like picking out your favorite kid. Do you have a favorite piece of work somewhere in the world? Is it even possible to pick one?
Yeah, I can just because it's sentimental to me,
Hmm.
but and it wasn't always this way. But I've just grown to love the era Parsegan sculpture over there at Notre Dame. Uh, that was fun to do. It's a little bit complicated with all those people. There's 4 people in it,
Hmm.
and very precarious the way I had to balance the coach up on top of the shoulders, and I got to know Era and his wife Katie, and I loved them very much, and so that has a real sentimental place in my heart, and it's one of the bigger sculptures I did.
Yeah, that's a great one. I was on campus not long ago and I recorded a video for my group, and that was the backdrop. So
Oh,
to be talking to you right now is pretty cool. The other sculpture of yours, other piece of work I wanted to touch on, was the Four Horsemen that sits in the Goog now, the athletics complex on campus there. I think it was, I read 15 years ago, 10 years ago, something along those lines. That was actually voted one of the top athletic sculptures in the world. Are you aware of that? I'm sure you're aware of
Yeah,
that
it
distinction.
was number one.
It was number one. Yet,
Yeah.
yeah, that's incredible. That's
Yeah,
absolutely
there
incredible.
was. And the Narrow Parsegion was number five.
Yes, that was going to be my follow-up. So you got
But
two.
it was actually it was a little more modest than that. It was the NCAA rating football sculptures. So it was not the world, it was just the NCAA.
Yeah.
And but that's still good because there was a great proliferation of sculptures around uh, the college football. So to get two in the top five, I was very pleased with that.
Did you network with fellow sculptors, athletic sculptors, or just anybody in that world? Did you end up meeting or connecting with any of them?
No, sculptors are kind of private people.
Hmm.
Uh, I've got three friends, maybe four, that are sculptors, and two of the three worked for me.
Wow.
Uh, so that's how I got to know them. But I could tell stories about how private they are and how they
Hmm.
won't share. That's the other difference. I've shared with everybody. I've got people coming over here for they want critiques of their work. They bring it with them, and I give them a critique. I'll go to their studios and help them. But I've never had that cooperation from others. They're very close group, and that's fine with me because I really never needed that.
Right. Where does that come from? It's almost like they're just protective of their work, or is it, I don't
Very
want to help
protective
you? It's
of.
got to be a protective thing,
Yeah,
right?
well, see, there's only so many customers out there, and I think they don't want to share to. You know, it's so strange because I'm just the other way around. I was talking to a priest today who wanted a liturgical piece done, and I told him I had a mold of that, and I could do that for him if he wanted to use a piece that had been done before. It was generic, so it wasn't like they were going to infringe on some other parish's possession. But I said, if you don't want that, I gave him the name of a sculptor who could do a very fine job starting from scratch on another piece. So I'm always recommending and giving away commissions to other sculptors.
Mhm.
Uh, but that's only happened to me once or twice, I think, in my career, where somebody, and that's only because they couldn't do it. Like there's sculptors who just can't get likenesses, so they would send them my way, and I'd be very grateful.
Did you have anybody study under you? I know you've
Yes,
critiqued and helped. Do you have a sculptor or two out there that kind of learned or honed their craft with you
right. And
watching?
we've been together for years. In fact, I used to call them my younger assistants, and now one of them is 60 and the other one's 72. And when I worked with them, they were in their 20s and 30s, and they were my younger assistant. But
Yeah.
people, time has a way of marching on, and people getting older.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, so I've got a little bit of a lightning round I want to go through, although some of it we've already hashed out. But the man is Jerry McKenna. For everybody that's going to watch this, all of you have taken a photo next to some of his work, and now you know the man behind the work. All the statues around Notre Dame Stadium. There's over 20 of 20 pieces of work on campus. Jerry McKenna made those, and the book, A Third Life: Sculptures for God, Country, and Notre Dame. There aren't many of those out there. I feel fortunate to have one, and I would like to send this to you. And if you wouldn't mind signing for me, I'd be honored.
I'd
I'll
love
get,
to.
thank you. I'll get that information from you offline. Okay, so we're toward the end here. Let's do a quick little lightning round. So you don't come back to campus as often. These are the same questions I ask everybody at the end, with a couple special ones for you. Do you have a special spot on campus when you get back? Is there somewhere you and your wife like to go visit and just look around and sit and watch campus? Is there a favorite spot you have to visit when you come back?
Well, one that I'm always aware of is my freshman year when I was in the seminary. I occupied the room in Old College that's right off the walk that comes over from Sacred Heart. If you go in the door, there's a room to the right, and it was Father Soren's room when he lived there, and I lived in that room for a year. That has to be special,
Oh yeah.
uh, and so that is my little special place on campus. It's kind of secret now; it's not anymore, but
Hmm.
and I love the campus, and there's so many places that I love, and
Yeah.
when I can, I get a golf cart so I can visit as many as I can.
Yeah,
I've
that's
got
the secret.
I've got 40 related sculptures on the campus, and I've never seen them all in place in situ. The,
Really?
yeah, mhm. I'm there. There's a cross in the St. Bridget of Kildare chapel. There's two sculptures in the Morse Coleman, one of Mike DeChico and one of uh, Saint Andre Bessette, and there's about four in the Guglielmino.
Hmm.
Uh, so
Yeah.
you know, I would like to do a sentimental journey and cover them all. That's not a lightning round, so I'll get off there.
No, no, that's fine.
Yes,
These
second question.
they always turn it. This is what always happens. How about when you come back? Do you have a favorite? Do you have a restaurant you guys like to go to? Do you come back often enough that you have one that
Oh
you always
yeah,
like to go?
I always call it advance, and I always go to Rocco's
Okay. Yep.
to see Lyndon Warren.
Okay.
That's my place. I've been going there since 1956, and they were founded just 2 years earlier than that.
That is a fantastic spot. I love it in
Yeah.
there. Okay, well, you haven't seen them all in place. Do you, sitting here today, do you have a favorite?
Also, I get a kick out of the Moose Krause and watching the people sit there. That's got to be the most famous or most photographed sculpture on the campus,
Oh yeah,
because
by far.
everybody wants to get the picture taken there.
Yeah, 100%. I imagine so. What about this? A project or a Notre Dame figure that you would have loved to have done but never got a commission for or just didn't get around to it. Is there a project sitting out there that you would have liked to get around to that you didn't now that we're retired?
Well, I'll answer that with the obvious, and then I'll answer it seriously. The
Okay.
obvious is the next coach to win a national championship.
Oh, yeah.
I do them as they come along, but it's been a long time since one came along.
I know.
So that's one I never got to, and I would have liked to have. I thought Kelly was going to do it, but he didn't. And we'll see what the future holds. Uh,
Yeah. Would you come out of retire would you come out of retirement and just take your time on it to do a Marcus Freeman? Is there even a chance?
no,
No?
no,
Okay.
I just couldn't do it justice. I just don't
Yeah.
have it in me anymore.
Yeah.
I'd love to do it, but I just don't have the strength to do it.
Yeah.
I, you do reach a point where you realize your limitations.
Yeah. No, understood. Understood. You're there. Favorite Notre Dame memory?
Oh boy, gee. Well, when I was in the seminary in 1960 or 57, a car pulled up, and a family from Hammond, Indiana got out of that car right there by Old College, and they trooped in to see their son. Uh, it just so happened that they had their daughter with them. And that daughter ended up being my wife of 53 years, Gail Thomas. So I
Wow.
guess that moment would have to be my best at the University of Notre Dame.
Give me give me a couple words or a phrase to describe now that I know you're freshly removed from it, but the sculptures all over the world, the awesome memories, the awesome jobs you've done. Millions of people have taken photos with your work in the backdrop and now I'm so happy that we've done this because they're going to be able to know the man behind those sculptures. How would you describe your third life looking back on it now, freshly removed?
Well, you led one direction that it made me think for a minute, and I'll just say this before I answer that: is when I have a small sculpture in Kathmandu, and I got another one in Japan. And there used to be an old saying when I was growing up where the globe was covered with pink, and they'd say the sun never set on the British Empire. Well, now I can say the sun will never set on a sculpture by Jerry McKenna because they're all around the world,
Hmm.
uh, and I get a great joy out of that. But it was a great career. The Air Force was strictly business. There was some pleasure, and I met a lot of wonderful people there. But sculpture was such that I met so many phenomenal people, got close to so many people. I mean, I look around my room and there's Regis there, and there's Queen Elizabeth, and there's a Doolittle Raiders, and Johnny Lou Jack, and Charlton Heston, Bob Hope, if I didn't mention him. Uh, just on and on. People that I was able to meet and enjoy as part of my work, and that was phenomenal. That was something totally unexpected from a young kid out of Connellsville, Pennsylvania.
Jerry, I appreciate your time. I'm so happy you did this. I'm honored. Jerry McKenna is the man. You are amazing. Again, thank you, thank you, thank you for your time. I cannot thank you enough. I hope to cross paths with you on campus one day, hopefully. And you have a great day, my friend. I really, really appreciate you.
Thank you, Gene. I enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, everybody, bye.